welcome to A Better Now. Kent Mulgat hosting today. I just found out minutes ago that I'm doing that, flanked by Jim Check, who you know, and Sharron Simpson. Sharron Simpson, a former city councillor and a member of the Simpson family, which Kelowna residents have plenty to thank for. Our waterfront area, which is now developed into where City Hall is and the old Memorial Arena, was all dedicated to the city by your grandfather, Stanley Simpson.
It was actually sold to the city for a nominal sum. This because the previously on that lot there was a sawmill that burned down, and it was simply a burned sawmill that he sold to the city for $55,000, which paid for the cleanup, and it was 11.5 acres in total.
Right. So super timely to have you here because further along the shore is where the Simpson Sawmill was. And it's that piece of property, 46 acres or so, that's going to be redeveloped. And,
it is.
And there's a chance for the public to check out what's coming down the road on that at a public hearing this week. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts on what you've seen so far about the redevelopment plans, much talked about and anticipated redevelopment plans for that piece of property.
They've presented 3 concept plans, very early stages, very difficult to see other than a wall of concrete, 15 or 16 high-rise stories, buildings, plus many lower-rise buildings, and a few amenities, Granville Island, like amenities in there, but these are early stages, so I think it's really important that people come out, and it's 5 to 8 o'clock at the Laurel on Thursday night. Come and have a look and tell the design crew and Holar Developments, which is the real estate arm of Tolko, tell them what you think. If you don't like it, tell them what you'd like to see. Because otherwise, from what I see at the moment, it's a wall of concrete.
Right. I'd like your opinion in a minute, Jim. But first of all, Loyal Wooldridge on council, he called it underwhelming.
Underwhelming. Yes, it would. That's charitable. Yes, it's underwhelming. However, Loyal is the only one who's spoken about this. And I find that really troubling that the rest of council has not expressed an opinion. Do they like it? Do they not like it? Do they hate it? Do they think it's the best thing that ever happened? This is the last opportunity Kelowna will ever have to do something on their waterfront. There is no waterfront left other than this.
Yeah, so for me, we look at the KSS property, the Kelowna Secondary School, where it used to be, and that was promised to be pretty, beautiful and stuff. And I would say that's underwhelming for what they promised. And then I would say if you don't raise your voice now, you're probably going to end up with something, similar.
Well, I think the city did the plan for the old KSS site, and they had a very grand plan of towers, lots of green space, energy efficient buildings, and the development community didn't buy that story. They said it couldn't work. It wasn't financially viable. This is a little different because this is all private development. So there aren't the restrictions. This is owned privately. These people can do what they want. Yep. The waterfront has to be available, accessible to the public. Other than that, I don't know what guidelines they have.
And that's one thing we have heard, that there would be, a person will be able to walk right along the whole waterfront. The public will have access.
Well, I think you better go and look at the plan.
Is that interrupted in your view? That I couldn't just walk right?
Oh, you probably can, but is it going to be worth walking?
Well, that's the question.
What I remember seeing was an artificial beach with an abundance of pink umbrellas. I went looking for sunbathing Barbie. I didn't find her, but there is an artificial beach there.
You mentioned concrete. Too much concrete.
Too much concrete. Once you concrete it over or pave it over, that's it. So what about green spaces? How much open spaces? Or how many trees? I mean,
I know there is green space as part of it.
yes. Have you looked at it? They're called wedges.
It's hard to get a feel for it from the images I've seen
Yes.
so far. Wedges.
That's what a lot of the green spaces are referred to. It's very difficult to see, and I understand this is the first kick at the can. So this is what they're coming out with. But if there isn't enough green space, aren't enough trees, aren't view corridors, you'll never look down the lake with these buildings the way. So are there any view corridors? Is there public access through the site? How do we get to that beach?
Right. You mentioned, though, that City Council is limited in its powers to force a developer to give up developable portions of the property to make
They
it
have
all...
to give a portion. However, what that portion looks like, how usable it is, what access to the public there is, none of that's clear.
All the more important to maybe attend...
Absolutely attend and ask the questions. The three concepts are pretty pictures. Do they convey what's actually going to happen? My recollection from being on council is nothing ever looked like it was presented in a design. Nothing ever showed up the way you thought it was going to show up.
It always looks a little better in the rendering.
Yes, the renderings are always lovely.
So don't expect it to turn out even better than you think.
No, better than the rendering. No, the rendering is always the peak. The building, what actually results is sometimes a surprise.
It does seem like the developers are making themselves open to this input in a way that comes across as sincere. Is that the feeling that you get? I mean, we have these public hearings coming, or public, I guess.
Well, they're
hearings.
inviting input.
Right.
The reality is, are they going to pay attention to you? I have no idea.
Right. But will they likely be getting input from you?
They will.
But you haven't started writing that up just yet.
Oh, yes, I have.
Have they been receiving input already?
Not for public consumption at this point.
But you have been speaking to people associated with it along the way? Maybe?
Maybe.
Try to confirm that later.
So your family, 5 generations of your family, Kelowna.
Yes.
You've been here and you've heard the stories from your grandfather and all that. So you've seen a lot more Kelowna than most people have.
I probably have, Jim, but I also lived in Toronto for 20 years.
Oh, did you? Okay.
And I lived in Vancouver for many years, and I lived in Montreal. So I have the really good fortune of when I was finishing high school, it was like everybody else, let me out of here, I can't stand this place. Yeah. I chose to return. Yeah. What I returned to was very different than what I left. And in the intervening years, it's become even more different. Parts of it are really good.
Is there something that what Kelowna used to have that you kind of miss, which they would have brought back, like the Aquatic Centre or anything?
Lots of controversy of whether the aquatic and the regatta were two sort of pivotal points of Kelowna history. The reality is that by the time the regatta collapsed, it had really lost its focus. When the Aquatic Centre burnt down, at that time there were many swim teams from all over the province who would not come and compete in fresh water. They wanted the chlorinated pool. So the controversy at the time is there was $300,000 of insurance money. It was a wooden grandstand. I mean, it had been around forever. They built the Parkinson Rec Centre. Was that a good decision? Probably.
So you don't hear that when you hear it from some people that really miss it, right? They don't give you that other side of the story, right?
But the reality is that the regatta had changed significantly. It lost its water focus. It was sort of becoming a midway, and I mean, I wasn't here during that time, so but my research would tell me. It was a midway on a logging show or along those lines. So a lot more people have had the benefit of the Parkinson wreck, which of course is now lived its useful
Right,
life.
up for like a how many millions of dollars?
Well,
is
it
up
was
for now?
it was 241 million, and I only remember that because I had trouble saying it because I thought it was so huge. I must be saying it wrong.
Well, this whole
However, there are 5 sites in that, not
Right,
just.
that's correct, yeah.
most of that is Parkinson with
Yes.
some other sites involved
Yes.
too, which
Yes.
I found very confusing to people, regarding this whole process.
Yes.
It would have been better if it had been done separately so people could focus on the one, but that's not the way they did it.
That's not the way they did it. But
Again, the perspective that Jim brings to the table here about how long you and your family have been here, when you look around and see how Kelowna is changing with all of these high rises, skyscrapers, just about, how do you feel about that?
Maybe it's inevitable. However, there's some concerns that I have about what I see as the growing inequity in housing in this community. And before UBC got into the ground down on Doyle Avenue, I walked that neighborhood, and Coronation Street and Costin and the little houses, these were affordable houses. They had been there a long time. They were originally houses for the people who worked in the canneries that were all in the North End. Kelowna is losing all of its affordable housing stock. And I was just at a presentation, and I asked the question, and I said, what's affordable? Is affordable something that is below market? How far below market? If the market for a condo is $1 million, what's affordable in a building like that? I think there was a greater cohesion in a smaller community. And I think it was more equitable.
Right.
There wasn't the great divergence of value. Kelowna is suffering because of its popularity.
Right. Apart from policy, it changes, right? You can't keep it as it was. But you mentioned these affordable houses. If they knock down 2 or 3 or 4 of them and put up an apartment building to house many, that's seen as making progress toward making things at least more affordable. But yet they've lost those original little houses that might have been affordable. So
what's affordable, Kent?
Not much in Kelowna.
Well, and all these little houses, and I tried to get a project going to let's at least record what this neighborhood looks like. Like, look at the houses. Some of them had wonderful fieldstone fences. Some of them had quirky stairways. Some of them had mammoth gardens. Most of them had chicken coops still in the backyard. I said, let's capture these in photos so we can at least have a record of what's happening.
Right.
Nobody was interested. Yeah. UBC wasn't listed. The library, the museum, nobody was interested. But these are little houses that had so much character and had so much history to them. We've lost that. The North End is now being gentrified. The North End, right at the base of Knox, was wartime housing. They were built, they cost $6,000 when they were built. However, you can't, these people in the little houses on Costin all sold their properties for $1 million.
Yeah.
So if developers are going to pay $1 million for, 8 or 10 lots on a block, they're going to have to put up a pretty substantial building.
Right.
So I don't blame the people who own the little houses. Mm-hmm. Windfall for them. However, we've lost housing stock that is affordable for people, and the developers can't afford to put up less than, glass, concrete, 20, 40 stories.
Cost per square foot, $1,000 a square foot, or $1,500 now. The numbers are getting higher and higher.
Imagine a time when you'd get a job as a laborer and be able to buy a detached home. Now they'll knock down 3 and build apartments. that people might be able to buy if their parents help.
Yes, yes. And I mean, that's Kelowna's reality. And that's why people who need x-rays can't get them without waiting for, I don't know, 8 months, because no x-ray technician can afford to live in the in the community. I don't know how baristas survive. They probably live at home with their mom, or a bunch of them live together.
Yeah.
I don't know the point of affordability for most people in this town. If you worked at the sawmill during my grandfather's time, you could work in the sawmill and have a house.
I grew up in the sawmill industry. I worked in the mill when I was 16, and my dad worked there, and that is out in Midway. You probably know where that is.
Yeah.
And houses were $30,000, right?
Yeah.
$35,000. So if you were working at the mill, you were making a pretty good wage. Like you were doing what would be considered like you were making this, similar to what a teacher was making, and you could
And
get a car and a
you,
house, and
you could take lumber home from the mill and have it
Absolutely.
deducted from your paycheck. So
Absolutely.
you could add on your whatever to your house.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
So, but those days are definitely gone, and cost per square foot is, I think, what a lot of people, when they look at land these days, 'cause it's so expensive, and they look to maximize their investment.
Of course.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? So we've all bought houses, and they've all increased in value. You can't, politically, you can't survive saying, okay, we're going to reduce the value
Well, if
of
you
your
look
house.
look at our view, like if you
Yeah.
look behind us, and I mean, it's pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
And Kelowna used to be a secret, I think, to a lot of people.
It's not a secret anymore.
And then people would come on vacation, and a lot of people that came on vacation would end up buying here
Buying
because they're just
here,
like, oh my God, this is in Canada. And I think it's just, and then I think there's a lot of Vancouver money now coming. There used to be a lot of Calgary money.
But people come here, and I find this really interesting. In a really insecure world where change and communities are and climate change is coming and food sources are threatened, people come to the Okanagan because we have water, because we can grow things, because we live in a valley and we're protected from wild weather, presumably. And we have international airports and connections. I mean, people choose it to come here because it's relatively safe and protected. So I think increasingly, as the world is unsettled, people seek out those values and they end up here.
Well, you were part of council for a while, and then there's a council now, and I think you can tell me, are they considering like the fast growth rate that Kelowna is seeing? Because sometimes, I know 20 years ago people would say to me that Kelowna is like a big city with kind of like small town mentality running it. Do you know what I mean? Because they didn't think it was getting that big, but it's getting big fast. And are we considering everything we need to consider in a fast growing metropolis? Really, like, and we're becoming.
Have you driven down Lakeshore Road?
I have, yeah. Do you know what I mean? So there is a lot of issues, and I think a lot of Kelowna is one of the few cities I know you can drive on the same road, and the road turns into about 6 different names.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of
that's character. Jim.
Yeah, that's character for sure. But
confusing if you're a fire department, but
but like curb and gutter still missing in some neighborhoods and stuff like that. So,
well, that's historically. Those were called dust shoulders because we had little rain. And why did you need a gutter? You just had the dirt on the side of the road, and the water just absorbed into it.
Well, they're still putting sewer in parts of Rutland. Like big projects are going in Rutland right now, and they're putting sewer in still. I mean, in a pretty big city, like we're still putting sewer in the first time.
Their first sewers.
Like there's still a lot of septic going on in Kelowna, right? So
we've grown so fast, we're running to catch up with ourselves.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So
yeah,
and I know we had a lot of, like, Edmonton had a big influence in city staff here too. There's a lot of people came from bigger cities and you lived in some bigger cities. Should we be tapping more of that resource when we're planning? Like for a bigger city?
I think we can't think like we live in a little city. We live in a bigger world, and we need to access resources and ideas from a much broader pool. I know that city council, when they were looking at the potential for the mill site, I know they went down to Vancouver and looked at Granville Island and the shipyard in North Vancouver. When I heard this, I thought, well, can we not have a broader horizon than Vancouver? And I draw a parallel there with Waterfront Park because I was on council during that time. It started before I was on council. It was an international competition for design possibilities for that area. The difference is that part of it was municipally owned.
Right.
But we asked the world what they thought we could do with this strip of waterfront. And it isn't perfect, but the boardwalk and
It's
the
beautiful,
lagoons
sure.
and the park and Tugboat Bay
And just
and
the
the marsh
spaciousness of it as
and
well.
the openness of it. It's pretty good. But if the vision for city council for the mill site is Granville Island and the shipyards, I mean, come on, there's a bigger world than that. Why? I mean, has nobody traveled and seen
Well, I
what
think
else
if
there
maybe
is?
if they sent Kent and I exploring
Yeah,
around the world,
yeah.
we could bring some ideas back.
Sure. So we probably have to wrap this up.
Well, you got a couple more minutes. I do have a couple more questions I want to ask.
Well, one thing I wouldn't mind tapping into as a former city councilor with a few years in between to really give it more thought. Do you find this current council, I think we were sort of coming to this issue a little bit, tends to not always express its opinion? We see, issues that divide the community and city councilors who don't necessarily want to lay it all out there and, butt heads over things. I think it's healthy because then everybody who voted for this person or that person feels their voice has been heard. Is there enough give and take in city council discussions?
No.
Why not?
I don't know. I think the directive comes from the top. If they're encouraged to speak their mind, they might be inclined to do more so. If they're not encouraged to speak their mind, then they probably won't. My expectation is they'll all have opinions. They will all speak those opinions. If they're unpopular, too bad. Probably they're not 100% unpopular, but risk it.
We have
Have
heard,
an opinion.
We
please.
have heard from councillors saying that they were warned that they shouldn't speak, and this isn't the current council, that they were warned not to speak
I've
out
heard
against.
that too.
Do you know what I mean? Like if they spoke out of turn, then they would face ramifications.
Yeah.
And I mean, I recognize that that's kind of how federal politics have changed and how provincial politics, like you're not allowed to speak out against the party. But this is not
This
federal
is
or
not party
provincial
politics. No.
These are not. They don't belong to a party. They belong to each other. Or I mean, they're only beholding to the voters, so they shouldn't be muzzled by other council members or the mayor.
I suspect that has happened.
Yeah.
Not my expectation at all, and I would expect all of them to have an opinion.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the things that politics does to you. Makes you have an opinion.
Yeah.
Even if, and express the opinion.
Right.
But on things that I could ask you what you thought about things you might not care at
Right.
all. However, if you're in public office, you got to care and you got to speak it.
I have heard recently, though, too, and I want to make this point, that there's I've heard from a couple people, and I'm not going to name any names, but that there's a councillor on council right now that isn't voting with the council, and he's a problem, right? And I said, my answer back was like, isn't he doing what he's supposed to be doing? Like instead of, do you know what I mean? Like it's because he's supposed to express his views, right? It's not groupthink.
Well, the comment, the criticism is that council makes up its mind before it ever gets into the council chambers.
Well, that's not fair.
Comes
right?
from that, and I that is right, at least in part.
So I remember you being on council, but I'm having a hard time remembering if council meetings back then had more of a hard exchange of ideas. I kind of think they were more like that. Would you say?
I would hope so. I sat next to Dale Hamill. Down from him was Al Horning. On the other side was Tom Treadgold, Tom Smithwick, Elise Clark.
Yeah.
I hope we spoke more than
More
we
than you're
spoke our minds.
But
Yeah.
you're very confident right now, so I mean, I imagine
Oh,
you had
but-
that, carried that back then too.
Not in your life.
No.
No. Distance helps. I've weathered the world. I'm now of the opinion that, I write opinion pieces and letters to the editor where appropriate and so forth. I'm sure most people say, good God, I wish she'd give it up and shut up. However, I have a perspective on things that current politicians probably don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a history of things that people don't have. And if you don't like what I say, I really don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's voting for me
Yeah, I know,
to do anything, so it's not at risk to me.
Experience
And I
matters,
don't,
too, right?
and I don't read the comment
Yeah.
section.
Lived experience matters, and I
It
mean,
does.
and
It
to
does.
me, if we even look at, and I want to bring it back to ourselves as Kelowna now, when we looked at building our newsroom, where other people were casting off experience because they were not technically feasible anymore, Kent Mulgat, Steve McNall, and that.
Yeah.
I mean, they have more experience probably than most reporters combined in
Absolutely.
this city.
Absolutely.
And
A different perspective.
yeah, because
And a historical perspective is valuable.
I think experience matters.
It does.
And I mean, I'm biased because I'm obviously older too, but I think it's bringing the youthful excitement and exuberance, and then but also balance that with experience, right? And I think
There's
that's,
wisdom
yeah.
in having a
We
perspective.
used to respect our elders a lot more, right? Where we would say, like that's
Well, ageism is alive and well,
yeah.
regardless of whether we.
I have an important question, I think, anyway,
Yeah.
because you've seen Kelowna quite a while back, and you see it now. Can you envision Kelowna 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now? What do you see, like as far as the city goes?
I don't know. The buzzword for today is density.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably more dense. Not everybody wants to live in a concrete tower.
I know
We
Marcy
have
doesn't.
a limit. Well, 40% of our land base is agricultural.
Mhm.
We could build on that. However, we'd lose an enormous amount of the sense and the flavor of the community. We've got to manage our resources better because we don't have enough water. The wildfires have changed our world. Transportation is going to have to be dealt with. I keep promoting a passenger ferry across the lake. Most people think you're nuts, but why is that any more bizarre than building another bridge? So it's going to be more of the same, I guess, Jim, is the best I can say.
I mean, I see it differently, but I'm kind of more immersed in tech than maybe most people. I see a future of like even 5 years from now where robo-taxis kind of are like a main source of transportation, where we don't need parking lots, where the cars will drop you off and then go to work themselves, and so less cars involved. And if computers are running the cars, that means we can move traffic faster because computers will move the traffic faster. So I see less need for vehicles. I see more self-driving buses and stuff like that too. I see transportation being solved by technology. I see a lot of that coming.
What are you going to do with the Harvey corridor that you stop every block on?
Well, they have to close them off. They have to close off most of the access. Because I mean, I said this a long time ago. Like Gordon, and maybe Richter, and then way back out there, like say, I'm going to try to get my Highway 33. Like there's overpasses, and I mean, it just
it's
close
an
off.
accident of our history that Harvey Avenue or Highway 97 cuts our city in half.
Yeah.
So are we going to divide
You could put a ring road in too, I guess, or you could do a bunch of other things like like big
Where
cities.
you've got Knox
Yeah,
Mountain in the way,
yeah.
you've got the South
You
Slope
put a
in the
clover
way.
leaf in there, that takes out a lot.
So it's tough for sure, but closing off Harvey and making the transportation corridor and only having a few access points to it probably makes the most sense.
Good luck.
Yeah, no, I get that, but that's still small town mentality when we're saying, oh, we don't want to close off Richter, we don't want to close
A
off.
lot of
Ethel,
that
we don't
got
wanna
aired
close
out
off.
when they built the new bridge about how many we want to keep the
Well, closing off partial of Abbott turned into a
maybe they. I always found it amazing that they kept the Abbott intersection.
partially, right?
Yeah.
Like you
Well,
lost.
you've got that old apartment block right in the corner. You can't do
Yeah.
anything with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you may as well leave Abbott accessible
I
because
guess.
the apartment, until you get rid of the apartment building, you can't broaden that road. So
I think
that's
the
history.
big challenges for the cities are definitely housing and transportation. Obviously, housing in so many different ways and homelessness and all that stuff. Like housing is definitely one of our biggest issues. And I also think transportation, getting people around, because you can't say, like Gord, Lovegrove wants to build an LRT, which I think is a great idea, but until we have density to support an LRT, I just don't know how that would be feasible.
He argues that there already is enough, but most people who are schooled on the subject tend to disagree with him, it seems.
I think
So-
the number is 500,000.
Yeah, I think
So
the
we
number's higher. But I mean, it would be great to see an LRT that runs from Penticton to Vernon, right?
Well, we've taken
Well,
out the
that's-
rail line.
That's part of his
Yeah.
plan.
That
too.
was the short-sightedness of all
Yeah,
this. We
I
took
agree.
out the rail line where you could do that.
Yeah.
Now, whether there's more capacity on the rail trail to build an LRT, another rail line, I mean, we took it out. How short-sighted was that?
Yeah. I think his idea, and I think it's best we get Gord to describe it, but I think you can put those rails right on a used street so vehicles can use it, and then somehow they're out of the way when the train comes.
We hope.
Or we could do hovercraft.
I am way out on an end of a branch.
Is there
here.
anything else that you'd like to say at this point, other than people get out there and have your say?
Just that people need to speak out. And I know in the era of social media that can be really challenging. It can be really challenging for politicians in the era of social media. It takes courage.
They're
to do
scared of
that.
backlash for sure. Right?
And my perspective, because that's not my strength, is I don't read the comments. So people can say whatever they want about me, and it really doesn't. I don't really care.
But here's where it's different though for you, and people have said this to me too. It's like they say, "Well, yeah, Jim, you're outspoken because you don't care as much because they can't hurt you as much." But they sometimes go after people's jobs and different things.
I
and-
know.
Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? They're
I
not coming after
understand
your
that.
job, right?
No.
And they come after people in so many different ways, right?
understand
And then
that.
so people are scared of their livelihoods, right?
Yes.
So you know what I mean? Like if to them, maybe that job is everything, right? So
The flip side of that is if you have something to say, you're entitled to say it, and it is valuable that you contribute to whatever it is. So you need to have the courage, and it takes enormous courage.
sure,
It
yeah.
would take enormous courage to be a politician today,
Yeah.
especially for women.
especially if you're dancing in that field and you feel like you're alone, right?
Yeah,
And then you say
yeah.
something,
Yeah.
and then where the people could support you, you'd think they join you in that dance, but then they're just scared because the first couple,
Yep.
if you had a mass join you, then you're okay. But like, it's the first couple of people that are just like, I don't want any part of that, right?
No,
Even though I agree
no,
with you, I don't want
and
any part of that.
I understand that, and it must be terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
However, we need input from everybody. We need their thoughts and what they care about and what they don't care about and what they're passionate about. And if you're afraid to speak it, we're in trouble.
To me, here's, and I'll leave this one thought for myself. It's just like, I think people are sometimes not confusing, like when they say, oh, like democracy is threatened because people want to speak out or something like that. I mean, that is democracy, right? When we disagree with each other and we allow each other to speak, even if we don't agree with each other, that's what democracy
Civil
is, right?
discourse is
Is the basis of
something in the
democracy.
past.
Yeah.
We don't have that anymore.
And just to bring it back to some focus, there's never been a more important time. This area of the North End that will be redeveloped.
Forever.
This is the last chance for people
is.
in the city of Kelowna to have, whether it gets listened to or not, who
Yeah.
knows, to have a say
Speak.
in how a big part of this city will look for a long time to come. So it's time to school yourself on what it looks like and what you think about it. Go out to these meetings.
Where's the next one?
Thursday night at the Laurel, 5 to 8 o'clock.
Do they have to RSVP or just show up?
It's an open house.
Just show up?
Right. That sounds like
And if somebody asks you why you're there, tell them that you've got some thoughts you want to share.
Bring
and
your
you can,
sign.
and you can see all about what's planned and
Yep.
see Sharron.
And Ken should be there gathering input.
Yes, there you are.
I just want to thank you so much for coming. It was
fun.
super
Thank you.
fun talking to you. Would love to do it again.
Yeah, anytime. I'm happy to do that.
All right. And
Thank you.
And I sign off thanking people to watch for
To
watching.
like and subscribe
To like and subscribe.
to Kelowna Now. We're on X. You love X, right?
Right. The site formerly known as Twitter.
Where the birds used to live.
Thanks a lot.